Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar for today. This is the EtherScope NXG version 1.2 introduction webinar. My name is Dan Klimke. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at NetAlly. Also with me is James Kokoska, our CTO. James, say hello.
Hello.
Good. It's all seems to be working. All right. Well, hey, thanks everyone for joining us today. We're going to run through this webinar about this most recent release on EtherScope. But first, just a quick review. For those of you who are not familiar with EtherScope, we call EtherScope a portable network expert. This comes from our long line of history and legacy of developing handheld tools since we were originally part of Fluke Networks. Our brief transition to being under part of NetScout, but stood up as an independent company last summer as NetAlly. And immediately following that, we launched the EtherScope last fall. And it is a multi-technology, all-in-one handheld network analyzer, enabling engineers and technicians to do more of their jobs done faster. EtherScope combines both wired and wireless network analysis, up to 10 gig on the wired side, as well as the Wi-Fi analysis. People use this for everything from infrastructure deployment and maintenance, validating adds, moves, and changes, troubleshooting, and documenting their network. So we're going to get into the details about what the latest software release is for this, version 1.2, which entails 4 major new capabilities. But before I get into talking about those details, as we go along here, do feel free to use the Q&A tab to ask questions. We've got James standing by, also one of our product managers, Julio Petrovich, will also be watching for questions. We'll try to get to those as we go along the way, and if not, catch up at the end in the Q&A session. All right, so 4 major new capabilities. Number 1, Wi-Fi site surveying with the AirMapper app. Now, we first introduced this and told everyone that it was coming at the WLPC conference in Phoenix in February. So the release of that fulfills that promise. So we'll talk a lot about that. Got a lot of excitement around that capability. Other major feature, monitoring for intermittent issues. Solving intermittent problems on a network is one of the most difficult tasks that a network professional has, and we'll talk about a key capability for that. We've created a simplified access anywhere remote control methodology and the ability to do multi-gig link validation. There's a whole slew of other feature enhancements, at least 22 by my count, various functions from auto test to performance testing. We might get a chance, if we have time, to mention a few of those at the end. And a key point to make, the release is free to all EtherScope NXG owners. Some of the features with respect to doing heat maps in Link Live are enabled by Ally Care. That's our support program. We'll get into the details of what that means and which capabilities those are. All right, so let's get into the AirMapper app and doing heat mapping in Link Live. A few bits of slideware first, and then we'll get into doing a live demo. But bottom line, we consider this a better way to survey your Wi-Fi. Doesn't require the use of a laptop. It's all in the palm of your hand. There's no dongle. There's no separate antenna or other device that needs to be connected. It's all in the handheld form factor of the EtherScope, and you don't need an external tethered device. It's all in the palm of your hand. A couple of our friends in the industry have weighed in with their review. We've had folks like Blake on our beta program who's tested out the software, and Blake indicates that from his point of view, it makes an extremely portable wireless testing platform. Blake's a big fan of the auto test feature that automates both wired and wireless testing, and points out that correlation is crucial when collecting data, and that AirMapper enhances our auto test with that critical location data showing where the test was performed. Also, our friend Lee Badman has done some testing for us, and his statement here is that it's another extremely useful dimension to what he believes is the best overall network support tool on the market right now. He points out that data collection is easy and LinkLive makes using that data from anywhere possible since it's based in the web. And there's no other hardware requirements needed. Site surveying is just one more tool in the impressive inventory of EtherScope NXG's capabilities. So let's get into the details. So what is AirMapper Site Survey? So this is an app that runs on the EtherScope NXG, which is an Android-based platform. And bottom line is this is a simpler, faster, easier way to survey and visualize and document your Wi-Fi network. Everything's all in one, right? From, as I mentioned, the wired testing and wired side analysis that we can do, including Wi-Fi. And now, in addition to troubleshooting, we can help with the surveying function of validating a Wi-Fi network without needing some external device. It's a ruggedized product, so you don't have to worry about damaging your phone or your tablet or carrying around a laptop. And one thing you're going to see here that has really impressed me with the job that our engineers have done on this, it's incredibly fast, and we'll see that in real time, how quickly you can go from taking samples to seeing the heat map and updating that heat map and working with that heat map in LinkLive, which is where the heat maps are driven. One other point I'll make is that our AirCheck G2, one of the market's favorite troubleshooting tools for Wi-Fi, this capability will also be available on AirCheck G2 in version 5, and that's due out this summer. So stay tuned for announcements about that as we get closer to that date. So heat mapping in LinkLive. So what we're going to do is show you how you can create this survey data from an AirMapper and then upload that data to the LinkLive cloud service. LinkLive is a cloud-based service that collects test information from all of our handheld testers. There's a lot of benefits for that. One is no matter where those test instruments are throughout the world, whenever anybody in your organization runs a test, that information is uploaded into LinkLive. So you get centralized visibility of your distributed test environment. And as I mentioned, you're going to see how fast it is to get that data up, get it processed, and be working on those heat maps in LinkLive. And as it's a web-based system, right, no operating system restrictions. If you can access it via the web, you're in. And your entire team can be a part of this too. So it enables collaboration with those surveyors in the field. And this is what that looks like. And there's basically, 4 key functions here. One is determining what type of map you'd like to look at. The signal, or basically the coverage map, is available to all users, but the more in-depth visualizations of noise, SNR, transmission and reception rates, those are provided to our customers with Ally Care support. Similarly, with respect to filters, filtering on SSID, everybody gets that, and that's handy, but the additional filter capabilities are also for customers with Ally Care. On the lower left-hand corner here, you see that you can set a threshold for your visualization. Either enter the numeric number in the box below or simply click in the slider bar to adjust the threshold for that visualization. And we'll see that in real time here shortly. And then the ability to quickly and easily generate reports. Pretty straightforward. Now, let's talk about who this is for. We talk about this being an easier, faster, simpler way to do site surveys, but this doesn't necessarily replace a dedicated planning or survey software tool. There's plenty of folks who need the capability to create predictive models, and that's what a product like Survey Pro, the Air Magnet Survey Pro product, does. And for folks that are Wi-Fi specialists, they're doing this all day long as their core function, the core function of their job or their company to do Wi-Fi integration. This is not necessarily a replacement for that because it doesn't do planning. It is strictly a survey tool. So for those people who are full-time users, got large sites, complex surveys, multi-floor, and all of that, the ability to import a CAD drawing, do predictive planning, and going through that workflow of planning an installation, installing and surveying and validating that installation, creating a report, ultimately to get paid for the job. There's a time and a place for that kind of capability. And that's why we still have, as many of you may have attended Julio's webinar last week about the most recent release of the Air Magnet software products that we have. But there's also a place for this kind of capability. In a way, you might say it's site survey for the rest of us. For in-house network operations staff, those people who operate as IT generalists, who need to be able to very quickly validate changes to the network or create heat maps for the purpose of troubleshooting without the need to use a complex, powerful, but time-consuming site survey and planning product. So the ability to quickly do a survey for troubleshooting and to validate changes, that's what we see the use model for AirMapper as. There's also managed service providers or small systems integrators who may see this as a better way to do very quick, small scale site surveys for the purposes of generating what some of them call a network birth certificate. Here's my evidence to my customer that says, I've deployed your wireless network, it's covering your facility, here's the performance factors of that network and the documentation for that job. The other aspect that we see as an important market for this is OEM equipment installers or field technicians for companies that sell capital equipment, basically. That might be everything from warehouse automation equipment to medical imaging equipment. And invariably, those people often get into finger pointing discussions with their client customers. Because they're running into latent network issues about on their client networks and find that their equipment is having trouble connecting or not enough performance, and they need a way to be able to deflect that blame and yet still come up with a reasonable way of showing what the root cause of those problems are. So we see this tool as being a very useful tool for those people who are working on other people's networks as a way to very quickly create those visualizations. So not to belabor the point, right? It's for the occasional survey user, smaller plans, less complex plans, validating installations. So really a way to provide fast, simple visualization of the RF space for those people. So let's get into it now. I'm going to switch over to We're going to switch over to connecting remotely to one of our EtherScopes that we have in a test network. And James is going to pitch in here too as I go along. Here we're remotely connected to an EtherScope that we've got in our offices in Colorado Springs. And I'm going to launch into the AirMapper application. Now you note I've already got a floor plan loaded in here, but I certainly am able to load new floor plans by going into the settings menu and importing floor plans into my EtherScope. And I've already done that, so I don't need to do that here. We could put a name in for this survey. We'll call this webinar survey. And we could enter a description. I won't bother with that. But the other factor here that we might change is our signal propagation. Now, what you'll see in the AirMapper UI is that wherever we take a sample, a circle will appear on the map showing the sample area. And it's a good idea to scale the size of that sample area to your facility. In a small office facility like the sample floor plan that I'm working here, I'm going to scale that down so that I get multiple samples covering the entire office space. In a larger facility, I might choose to have a larger signal propagation radius. Bottom line is that the more samples I take, the more data I'm going to have and the more accurate my survey is going to be. So we'll just go with that. And the other thing you may want to check is in the general settings for EtherScope, we can now in this version of software, make a selection about what Wi-Fi bands and channels we're going to scan as part of our survey. Now, in most cases, you're going to want to have that set fairly broadly because you're going to want to be able to see any neighbor networks or all the APs and all the channels that are in use for your network. For the purpose of this demonstration, though, I'm simply going to pick the 2.4 gigahertz band uh, and go with that. Tell you what, I'm going to up my dwell time. Now, dwell time is the amount of time that the EtherScope and the AirMapper app will observe a particular channel before it moves on to the next. And if you look in the upper left-hand corner, you can see that at this point, we're still scanning through all of the bands, both in 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz band. So all the channels in those bands. But as soon as I select this and say OK, then we're simply going to be scanning the 2.4 gigahertz range as soon as we start. All right, so back to AirMapper. And just for the visualization, I'm going to rotate that map here. There's one other setting I didn't show, which is the scaling of the map, and that's simply the ability to tell AirMapper what the height and width of your floor plan is. You only have to enter in one of those parameters, and AirMapper will scale the map to your building size, the other dimension. And I find that it's also important to use an image that is cropped tight to the walls of the building. That just makes it easier to see. But of course, since this is an Android device, you can always zoom in with your two-finger zoom in to get a finer resolution. If you're looking at a very large floor plan, just zoom in on the screen. And then we're simply going to start. Click the start button. And we'll just start here in the entrance of this building and click for a sample. I think, actually, you know what? And James will probably correct me if I'm wrong. I think what I should have done here is adjust my building size because I think my drawing is not scaled correctly. Yeah, that would be, that's a good point. So we're going to change this factor. We're going to say this is about 95 feet. And notice how, okay, it's my image is in the wide format. I had rotated it, so this is going to make this go a little bit smoother. And we'll go back to the floor plan. And you can see how that scaled up my sample size, right? It scaled my my propagation, signal propagation radius to cover a bit more of the floor plan because I corrected the size of my building. So bottom line, this is what I do. I simply walk the facility. The sample turning red tells me that EtherScope is collecting data. And when it turns green, that tells me it's completed collecting data for that particular sample area. And I can simply move throughout my facility, taking more samples. And again, the larger my signal propagation radius, the fewer samples I would need to take. But for the point of granularity, you can keep it small and take more samples. James, I'll just open it up to you at this point to see if you've got any commentary to add as we go through and start collecting some of this data.
Yeah, so I'll say this. So we started this first release with sample click. We're doing a variety of improvements here for continuous sampling and path and things like that. So you'll see here shortly, in fact, in a very upcoming additional release that this will be literally instantaneous because it'll be using the currently scanned values instead of gathering a new set of data.
Right on. So instead of just the click to sample, we're actually going to be continuously sampling between those clicks. Is that correct?
Correct.
Great. And so that's basically it. Now, sometimes what I found is that I may fat finger a sample and I might click in a place on the map that is not a logical place, like on top of a set of cubicle walls. So it's pretty simple to just use the back arrow to undo that sample. And then I can simply be a little bit more careful with my clicking. Like I said, you can always zoom in to tap and collect that sample. That's basically it on the AirMapper side of things on the EtherScope. When I hit stop, I'm going to now upload that information into Link Live. But before I do that, I thought I would just show you the Link Live product. So Link Live, again, is this cloud-based service that we offer where the test results from any one of our testers, whether that's an EtherScope or an AirCheck or a Link Sprinter or a Link Runner, are all uploaded for documentation and for collaboration. And the new feature, of course, is the AirMapper capability inside of Link Live. So I wanted to pull this up here just to show you, okay, so the last survey we had done here that uploaded into Link Live was yesterday. If I'm going to go back over to my EtherScope, I'm going to click the Upload to Link Live button, and we're going to webinar April 28. And we'll just leave the room job comment the way it is. And save to AirMapper files. Now, as soon as I click this, I'm going to go over to Link Live. It's going to take just a moment, but you're going to see that survey information upload into Link Live. And while we're waiting, let's go over and take a look at what that heat map looks like. So when we get that survey loaded, quick check. When we get that survey loaded, what you're going to see is the ability to, I'm on the wrong one, sorry. We simply select the data from the surveys, click the View Survey button, and then Link Live will populate the map with those samples. Now, in this case, we just are we're on the default coverage map with no filters applied. We can manipulate the drawing, zoom in, zoom out as your browser allows. But we may want to look at a different visualization like signal to noise ratio. So we're simply going to click down into that, pull up that visualization, and maybe let's apply a filter in this case. Let's go to, just to make it simple, we'll pull our guest SSID in here. And now we're filtering down into this guest SSID. And these filters are stackable, of course. We can add in any number of filters if we want to filter on band, on channel, BSSID, specific APs, type of wireless LAN, or channel width. We can add any one of those filters in to the filter stack. And then I mentioned the threshold bar. So all I really need to do is click into this threshold bar in order to set a threshold. And this is a very useful way to be able to visualize what might the impact be on my network if, well, number one, if I need to set a specific threshold for a particular metric, or if my network degrades in any fashion, what are the parts of my network which would see that impact first? So James, again, any color commentary you want to add at this point or something else that you'd like me to show about that capability?
Yeah, again, looking forward, a lot of new heat map types, particularly working on interference. But the filtering is very powerful because as Dan mentioned, it's stackable. You can say just this SSID and just on these just on channel 6 and sort of see coverage there to verify 2.4 gig coverage on different channels. And that filter set stays intact as you change your views in terms of different heat map types.
And what type of, you mentioned the survey, the change to the survey methodology going to a continuous. We could probably go ahead and talk about what the other visualizations are that we're coming up with soon.
Yeah, so specifically the interference heat maps, co-channel and adjacent channel interference. And Dan, if you move your mouse around, you'll see the flyover. on I think, yeah, there we go. So as you move your mouse around, you can see the actual flyover, and this is of course more interactive when it's not traversing the country a few times, but you could imagine flying over this and us showing you the number of co-channel interferers there are, or the number of adjacent channel interferers there are on, and so the heat map, the scale will be driven by number of interferers, number of devices on the same channel, on the same SSID, all sorts of things like that.
Cool. And then two, another factor that we want to show, another capability we want to take a look at is the fact that in addition to that flyover data that we're showing, we can click on a specific sample area. Tell you what, I'm going to get rid of my filter to make this a bit more interesting, and hit apply. So when we select on a specific sample area, we're also getting this data table that is showing the collected data behind that sample area. And this is also manipulatable. We can simply sort by the column headings, by channel, SSID. You can see all of the data that's here. And that's also filterable too. So if they're, well, I don't know why Julio's name crops up here, but if I want to filter down on a particular SSID, I can simply add that to the filter. If I'm looking for a particular MAC address, I can filter on that. Basically, any value that's in the data table, I can instantly create a filter for. And James, how do you envision the use of that particular information?
A lot of times there's it is another table we're continuing to add to. In fact, in the next release next month, you'll see that we have the 802.11 type here. So, a lot of times you just need to drill in and see what's actually driving the heat. And this just gives you a way to drill into that. Also, this table is included in a report. And so if you can generate not only the heat map, but this table for whatever point you choose to highlight on the heat map.
Cool. So let's see here. So what I've done is gone back and collecting a bit more survey data on the side over here as I've been showing this. Let me pull this back over. And let's rerun this upload.
Hey, while you do that, I'll jump in. So our intent here was that this is a very flexible run control. So in fact, when Dan gets to the remote, you'll see that you could even be driving this survey with somebody just walking the floor remotely because we have a separate Wi-Fi management radio. You can basically gather points that you can push to link live. You could be looking at it in link live, then you could just decide, hey, we didn't quite get some corner of the building over here, or you can resume, gather more points, again push to link live. And so because the uploads are so fast, and because we've sort of separated we sort of closed the gap in terms of distance, where it doesn't matter where the survey is being taken and where the survey is being analyzed. It's very easy to iterate through this and add incrementally. It isn't just that once you push, you're done with that survey. You can just keep going. You could add a couple of data points, push to link live, undo, take those away, continue on. So just a lot of flexibility in the run control here.
Since you mentioned that, I'm going to go ahead and do that. We'll push this back up to link live.
So the job comment here is, we call it our sticky comment, and it would save Dan from entering this every time, right? So when you set a job comment, that means that everything that comes off of the box, be it a survey, a capture, an auto test result, a discovery snapshot, everything gets labeled with that. So it makes it really easy to find all activity around a certain site or a particular task that you were performing.
And there's that data. So let's go ahead and view that survey. And so you can see that I've gone ahead and added those additional data points here. Now, understand, as James pointed out, I mean, I could be doing this, I am doing this remotely on an EtherScope that's sitting somewhere in in our little demo studio in our Colorado Springs office. Since it's not mobile, of course, it's gathering the same exact data every single time. But with EtherScope connected to the Wi-Fi network, using one of its radios, its management radio, I could literally be doing this site survey remotely, as that EtherScope is being walked around. I could be observing what the technician walking that unit around is doing at that remote site, just like I am here, collecting that data remotely from my EtherScope and automatically pumping it up into Link Live to create that visualization. So James, we got a couple of questions here, like what format do floor plans have to be produced in? You want to address that while we...
Yeah, so currently it's JPEG or PNG. A couple things. One is we have the camera in the EtherScope, and so you could always take a picture of a fire escape map or an office plan. That would be an easy way to just have it on the unit. And of course, in time, we would expand this out to import things like PDF and other popular formats. I'll say one other thing. We actually have Google Earth in the App Store, and you can actually, if you're doing an outdoor thing, you can actually get the screenshot you want on Google Earth, zooming in, capture the screen, and then immediately do a survey off of that with no additional tools.
And I think maybe we'll show that at the next webinar once we release the additional visualizations. We could show how that can be done as well. So that's basically it, is the ability to quickly walk a facility. I saw one question is, how long would it take us to do a survey for a building like this? Time is dependent on a couple of things. One is how many of those channels that you're scanning and the dwell time that you're spending per channel, and then how many samples you're going to take. But I could easily see that doing a building of this size may take 10 or 15 minutes. And then the upload to Link Live is pretty quick. We can have our laptop connected to that network. We can go up to Link Live and see the results as they come in. I could easily see you could be from the point of starting to run that survey to the point of generating the document. Yeah, you could probably do a site survey of a building this size in about 20 minutes. I think that's certainly within reason. So I see also that there's a question about the rollout to the G2, the AirCheck G2. Again, James, I think our plan is that is going to be released sometime this summer. I think our plan is that would be out probably mid Q3, August timeframe at this point.
Yeah, that's correct. And the UI will be identical to what you're seeing here.
Great.
Similar workflow, similar process, same settings.
Well, tell you what, there's a couple other features that I wanted to cover before we wrap up. I think we said this webinar was going to be about 45 minutes long. We got about 10 minutes more. So let me just wrap up about some of the other capabilities. First off, wrapping up, why AirMapper? Because it's a multifunction tool. Maybe you're tired of paying too much for single function tools. Perhaps you don't need the complexity of a full-blown site surveying and planning solution. You realize you need a faster way to visualize your network for troubleshooting purposes, or maybe you don't have a way to quickly visualize your network for troubleshooting. So this provides a viable option for that. And the other aspect too that a lot of our customers recognize is you've got to solve problems on both sides of the access point, and having the capability to do not only Wi-Fi tests and analysis and now Wi-Fi site surveying, but all of the in-depth wireline analysis capabilities that we have with EtherScope means it really truly is that all-in-one tool. So there you go. The simplest, quickest, easiest way to identify problem areas in your Wi-Fi network is by getting that visualization. And as James pointed out, got more enhancements coming soon. So real quickly, the 24-hour monitoring for intermittent issues, one of the capabilities that we've added now is the ability to do a periodic auto test. So this basically lets us program EtherScope's auto test to run at a specified interval over a specified period of time. And as I was showing you, all of this test data is uploaded into Link Live. So now you get the ability to run this testing, and this is both wired and wireless testing. It's not just one or the other, it can be both. And then use filtering in Link Live to sort on the data you've collected. You can use this in conjunction with certain trending graphs that we have to look for problem correlation, whether that's Wi-Fi traffic as an example, or the utilization of a particular switch port. And then we've also added the capability to get notified when problems occur. So for that particular EtherScope, you can set the Link Live service to send you an email when a problem occurs. So this is a really handy way to be notified when EtherScope is out there running an auto test, to be looking for those intermittent issues and get notified when those issues happen. So helps you know when those issues are happening, having the data to drill into those intermittent problems. It's also a really great way to understand baselining of your network. That's a key capability, knowledge, I should say, to know what normal is on your network. The worst thing is to not know what normal is when you're troubleshooting and finding a problem that may have been in existence for a long time, and you waste your time trying to troubleshoot that. So knowing what normal is and knowing how those metrics can vary over time. A couple of key purposes behind auto test. Let's also talk about this access anywhere remote control. This is basically a ability to remotely control an EtherScope through Link Live. So in addition to the ability to generate heat maps, we've got the ability to connect to an EtherScope remotely through Link Live. Now, we've always had the capability to control EtherScope through VNC, which is great, works when your workstation is on the same network or you've got a route to talk to that EtherScope in your network, but it's just not possible to connect to an EtherScope at distant sites if you're not on the same network, such as being here at home, connecting through a wireless router that's providing NAT for me. If NAT is on the network I'm talking to, then I've just got no way to connect by way of VNC. But using this web remote control through Link Live, acting as the intermediary, I'm able to instantly connect to that EtherScope remotely through the Link Live cloud service. So again, very handy when, like in current days, travel is restricted, if not impossible. If I've got an EtherScope out at my remote site, I can simply connect to it to be able to do that troubleshooting. And as you saw, even site surveying from a remote connection. And then the last big capability that we've added in this release is SNR cable test for multi-gig. So we know a lot about multi-gig being deployed to help support higher bandwidth to our access points. So delivering better than 1 gig link speed to those APs, or perhaps it's for certain IoT devices or other mechanics that require higher bandwidth than 1 gig. So this is what multi-gig is for, to deliver 2.5, 5, and even up to 10 gigabits per second. Essentially a way of delivering new or more bandwidth over old media. But not all cable plants support this. And what we're hearing from a lot of customers and some infrastructure vendors is that people are being a bit surprised, or they're a bit in the dark about whether or not their cable plant will support multi-gig, or it's not linking at the speed that they're expecting, or in some cases, even bouncing links at all, preventing linking from happening at those high speeds at all. So either downshifting to lower speeds or bouncing links, it's difficult to troubleshoot. And I referenced this network computing article. You can take a look at, does a really good job of summarizing the technology and the requirements to be able to support multi-gig. So how can you troubleshoot this? Well, That's why we've added this capability to do a signal to noise ratio test on the link to be able to tell what that factor is. So from our auto test, doing a wired link test where we normally, and we'll show the link speed, the advertised speed, the actual speed that we linked at, and the duplex. Now we're also showing both the delay skew for each channel in multi-gig and the signal to noise ratio as measured. And if everything's fine, great, threshold, the default threshold is 5 dB, but if that fails, you can see what that looks like if there's a failed result or a parameter that does not meet that threshold. So being able to validate those cabling links for multi-gig to be able to help troubleshoot why you're not getting the speeds that you expect, this is going to be a tremendous capability to be able to look for that particular factor that could be causing those switch links to downshift or bounce. James, any other comment on that capability or the others that I just mentioned?
Yeah, so there's a great. We're showing individual features here. There's a great sum of the parts where 1 + 1 = 2 or 3, and a good example of that is doing this signal to noise measurement. It's on every auto test. You can set the threshold. This SNR, by the way, is going to be driven by a couple things. One is alien crosstalk, which is how the cable runs in the bundle. It's going to be a function of the quality of the installed cable, because think about it, you got to have the patch cables, the patch panels, the horizontal cabling, all the punch downs, all that need to be, correct and appropriate with not too much untwisting and things like that. There's also a lot of impulse noise that we're finding out is affecting N-base T, coming off a static off of chairs, could be an air conditioner turning on. And so you can take a test like this and then combine it with the periodic auto test, which we call rinse and repeat internally, and basically you can say, hey, for 24 hours every minute I want to basically link to this switch, and then if any, and that's 3,600 test results, then push to link live. Easy to filter. Dan sort of showed the email alert. You can say, hey, and then send me an alert if I ever don't meet that SNR, is literally what you're saying. And so this ability to sort of combine the SNR measurement with threshold setting, and even though we're talking about a kind of a low level layer 1 setting here, it could be that you can set thresholds on the time that it takes to pull an entire web page, right? The thresholds exist throughout the product, layer 1 through 7 tests. Run them over and over again and get notified. And you may figure out that, hey, it's like every hour or every 2 hours or 2 in the morning is when the SNR is impacted. So just a lot of ability to sort of take what's typically a dispatch instantaneous tool and turn it into kind of a lightweight monitoring system.
And James, I do need to help clarify something. So, and maybe there's some confusion caused by the quote from Blake about auto test. Uh, Strictly using the term auto test in EtherScope, we refer to what we're seeing on the screen right now, right? This is an auto test profile where EtherScope can do a variety of wired network tests and a variety of wireless tests like the air quality profile or validate some specific SSID. And I think there was some confusion that is there some linkage between this auto test and the samples that we're taking with the AirMapper app? And I want to be clear that not exactly, but maybe you could help clarify that and tell us how might you use this auto test function on a wireless network in conjunction with the site survey.
Yeah, so site survey is it's in your hand, you're walking around, you're gathering the data, you can then do any post analysis that you want. Auto test is really more of a connectivity test. You're either connecting on a wired network or a Wi-Fi network or running this air quality test. But if you come back out to the top level, Dan, please, the What's nice about this is you can run this periodic auto test on any number of individual profiles. There we go. And a profile can be wired or Wi-Fi. And in fact, in version 1.2, amongst those 22 features Dan mentioned, we added the ability to actually select a band for an SSID. So you could say, I want to test my production SSID, and I want to do it on 2.4, and I want to do it on 5 gig. And oh, by the way, I'm hooked up on the wired, and I want to do that. And then all of those tests can actually can leverage the same target tests within. So I want to pull an entire web page, and I want to understand how that compares between 2.4 gig, 5 gig, and wired. And then when you layer this periodic thing, I want to do that over and over again, and let me know if any of those networks, any of those 3 access methods ever failed the response time on an FTP pull or an HTTP pull or an SNR measurement anytime during that period. So there's just a lot of ability and versatility here to stack up and build any sort of a profile that you want and run it over time, and then get a notification of any one-off failure.
Awesome, cool. Well, I see that we're about over the time that we had intended. I think Julio's been doing a great job of answering some of the questions on the side. Um, James, any other last points that you'd like to make before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I'd say stay tuned. We've got for those of you that have been following along, we launched the product in October. We had a robust 1.1 release in January. Again, here we are back in April with a 1.2 release, adding 4 major functions, and we're just going to continue adding capabilities. Certainly survey has a deep roadmap, right? These are products with that are on version 10s, right? So active survey, performance survey. I saw the comment adding a note, adding a picture during the survey, additional heat map types. It just goes on and on, right? And we're just sort of taking those down in a prioritized order. So stay tuned in the survey space for 1.3 in the future, and I appreciate everybody attending today.
Awesome, thanks. Yes, again, thanks everybody for attending, and watch this space for more improvements on EtherScope and AirMapper. Hope you all have a great day. Thanks. Signing off.
Thank you.